You're listening to CalmUnity Global Internet Radio. It is my pleasure today to introduce our guest on Snippets from Sisterhood, Carolyn Martin. We have known Carolyn and her charming spouse, Barry Martin, for decades. Carolyn has been a leader in many arenas in Sacramento and California, including public health and women's issues. Carolyn holds an MA in U.S. history from the University of Washington. She is a retired community college history instructor with a keen interest in women who have been ignored, but who deserve recognition. Carolyn has done community presentations of famous women, including period costuming. Carolyn, welcome to CalmUnity's Snippets from Sisterhood. Who will you be telling us about today?
Thank you for asking me to share a slice of women's history. Today I'll be talking about a few inventors. The first is Lillian Gilbreth. In 1900, she graduated from the University of California, Berkeley, at a time when about 3% of American women had a college degree. And she went on and eventually had advanced degrees in both psychology and, most astonishing, engineering. She married, and believe it or not, this woman became the mother of not only one, but 12 children. Maybe you've read about her in a book called Cheaper by the Dozen, or even seen the movie. She worked with her husband on time and motion studies with that newfangled invention, the camera, to increase efficiency, and they authored 3 books. Machines don't get tired, but people do. So one of the things she was most interested in was, what did fatigue do to the efficiency of the worker? Sadly, her husband died when he was only 56. She was left with all these children, and she immediately went to work as a consultant. One of the things that she invented was the perfect triangle in your kitchen. General Electric wanted to sell more appliances, so they hired her. And what she did was baked a cake using different formations in the kitchen, and she counted the steps it took to bake the cake. Eventually, she came up with the perfect triangle: stove, refrigerator, and a cabinet under the sink. She couldn't cook, but boy, could she experiment. Now here's her big invention that you've probably seen. It's a small trash can that sits on the floor, and to open the lid, you step on a pedal and the lid pops open. She actually invented this because she was very interested in helping handicapped people, and it helps them and everybody else as well, rather than bending over. My second inventor is Betty Nesmith Graham. Unlike Lillian, she was not well educated at all. In fact, she didn't even finish high school. She was a single mom working as a secretary after World War II. Do you remember typewriters? Do you remember trying to make a correction with an eraser? And what a mess it was, especially if you had a carbon copy? Ooh. Then it got worse. In 1961, IBM introduced the Selectric typewriter, an electric typewriter where you hardly had to touch the keys, but they pounded into the paper. So it was almost impossible to make a correction on a typewritten paper done on a Selectric. Well, Betty Graham knew that artists did not try to erase their mistakes. They just painted over them. So she mixed up some white watercolor paint, used it and a small brush to correct her mistakes at work. Well, the other secretary said, "Hey, this is wonderful. I've got to have that too." And so the next thing you know, she is in the garage making up small bottles of white paint with her son and trying to sell them. Fast forward. By 1979, She had 100 employees. She sold her invention, which we know as liquid paper, to Gillette for $47 million. Pretty impressive for a woman inventor who hadn't even finished high school. Now, here's a little sidebar. You may have heard of her son, Michael Naismith. He was a pop music star, one of the four Monkees, and the Monkees outsold the Beatles in 1971. So that's your trivia for the day. The next inventor is a woman named Marian Donovan. She's another woman who became a millionaire from her very practical invention. Like Lillian Gilbreth, she had a university degree. After World War II, she was living in Connecticut on the East Coast. When her second daughter was born, she was frustrated because she was constantly washing cloth diapers and bedding. She, of course, used rubber pants, but they gave the baby a terrible rash because the rubber didn't breathe. Her inspiration for her invention was her shower curtain. She thought maybe that would help make a better pants for diapers. Well, 3 years after first spotting her shower curtain and thinking, this has possibilities, and many cut-up shower curtains, she created a reusable diaper cover made of breathable light plastic and surplus nylon parachute cloth, and it even had the safety feature of plastic snaps. She sold her patent rights for $1 million. And she didn't stop inventing. Her next brainstorm was replacing cloth diapers with disposable, absorbent paper ones. Well, she couldn't sell it. The businessmen looked at her and said, no one would ever buy a product you just throw away. How little they knew. Pampers finally made the market years later in 1961. Marian Donovan. Our last inventor is Grace Murray Hopper, who was, believe it or not, a rear admiral in the United States Navy. Well, everybody who uses a computer, and that's nearly everybody in the whole world, should know her name. In World War II, Hopper, who had earned a PhD in math, entered the U.S. Navy Reserve, and she was assigned to Harvard University's Mark I computer in 1943. This computer was 51 feet long, 8 feet high, and it weighed 5 tons. Her orders were, quote, program this beast and get it running. And she did exactly that. She wrote a 560-page manual on computer programming, and the computer was used especially in submarine warfare during World War II. After the war, she worked for private companies, and she helped create COBOL, Common Business-Oriented Language, which, of course, is still used in some computer programming. She also added to our everyday vocabulary. When your computer breaks down, you get a techie person to, quote, debug it. That's because Hopper fixed the giant computer at Harvard by finding one little moth in it and removing it. She debugged the Harvard computer. She retired in 1968 as a naval officer. Then she accepted a 6-month special duty assignment that lasted just 20 years. Her research and problem solving became the basis for the U.S. Department of Defense computers. In fact, she developed the fleet-wide tactical data system for all American submarines. Congress actually promoted her to Commodore, and a guided missile Navy ship is named after Grace Murray Hopper. She was eventually promoted to Rear Admiral. She retired at 85, the oldest active duty officer in the Navy. So that's my summary of a few women inventors that I bet you've never heard of.
Carolyn, this has been fantastic. And I hope that you will come back and share some of the other women that have made such a difference in our lives. And honest to God, sometimes we don't know it's a woman that invented what we're actually using right now. So I thank you for being with us today on CalmUnity's Snippets from Sisterhood.